Summary of Mere Christianity by C.S. Lewis. In this book, Lewis examines the life of Christians in great detail, argues that Christianity is a viable religion from a logical standpoint, and defends the faith against its detractors. In the book's first part, Lewis talks about the law of human nature. He says that when you look at the past of people, you can't help but notice how similar, at least on a basic level, their moral rules are. Lewis says that moral law isn't just something that people made up on their own, it's a real, eternal thing that was made by an all-powerful being who exists outside of space and time and shows itself to people through moral law. Lewis talks about a few different ideas about who the all-powerful being is in the second part of the book. The pantheists are a group of people who think that God, who has all power, is neither good nor bad. Pantheists think that God is the whole world, which means that everything in it is divine. Other religions, like Islam, Judaism, and Christianity, believe that God made the universe but is separate from it. Since God is good, they think that people should work hard to make the universe a better place. Christians also think that the devil is the most evil thing in the world. But in Christianity, evil is not the same as good. Evil is spoiled good, which means that it is the corruption or abuse of good. When you look around the world, it's clear that almost everywhere, good has been turned into evil. When Lewis was younger, he couldn't believe in a fair God who would let earth turn into a sad, unfair place. But the only way a skeptic could question the Christian model of God would be to use the same standard for just and unjust that we used in part 1 to accept that God exists. Lewis then tries to explain why a good God would let bad things happen by saying that God gives people the gift of free will. This means that they have to deal with the challenge of being good in spite of the temptations of evil, which they will be richly rewarded for in heaven. At the end of part 2, Lewis talks about Jesus Christ, who is the most important part of the Christian faith. Lewis says that the only way to be truly good is to worship Christ. Lewis says that even though different Christian groups honor Christ in different ways, they can all agree on the basic facts about Christ's presence, so they can all be saved. Part 3 of the book is about how a good Christian should live. Lewis says that there are 3 parts to morality: harmony between people, harmony within a person, and constant care to reach a state of happiness. All 3 parts of morals are held up by virtues, and all sins go against at least one of these 3 parts. Lewis talks quickly about the 4 cardinal virtues: prudence, temperance, justice, and courage, and explains why they are important for moral life. Lewis spends a lot of time supporting chastity, which is the most disliked part of Christian morals. He says that sex and sexuality are everywhere in modern society, so much so that people think having a lot of sex is normal and healthy. Lewis, on the other hand, says that the sexual urge, like any other emotion, needs to be tamed and controlled. Lewis also says good things about marriage. People often say that being in love is the only reason to get married, but Lewis says that being married is much more beautiful and majestic than being in love, because a married couple must stay together for life, showing their loyalty and respect for each other as people instead of just following their emotions. Lewis says that pride is the worst sin because it makes people want to put themselves above God. He says that many people who think they are good Christians actually worship a false god and privately think they are better than everyone else. If they aren't careful, this way of thinking will lead them to hell. At the end of part 3, Lewis talks about the 3 principles of theology: kindness, hope, and faith. Charity is a hard trait to have because it requires people to be kind and giving to people they may not like. Lewis says that one of the miracles of virtue is that when we act like we respect other people, we end up respecting them. Lewis says that faith is one of the hardest parts of being a Christian, especially when it comes to having faith in God's plan for salvation. After a Christian gets used to following God's moral law, they sometimes hit a point of hopelessness where they see how sinful they really are. But even when they feel hopeless, a good Christian will find the strength to keep going, hoping, but not being sure, that God will help them find the way to heaven. A good Christian must both trust that God will take care of them and work hard to be good. In the last part of the book, Lewis talks about theology, which is the science of God. He looks at the Holy Trinity and the thought that God is both one thing and three things at the same time. Lewis compares the Holy Trinity to a die. Just like a die has 6 square sides but is still one three-dimensional object, God has 3 parts but is still one being. Lewis also talks about how a God who knows everything and gives people free will seem to go against each other. If God knows everything, it seems like people don't really have a choice in what happens to them. Lewis answers this apparent conflict by saying that God exists outside of time. This means that God knows the past, present, and future of people at the same time, while people have free will in time as they know it. Lewis goes on to say that if people worship Christ, they can rise above their mortal nature and experience the divine life that Christ himself lived. In other words, if they worship Christ, they can also become sons of God. Good Christians come together because they love God, but they don't lose who they are in the process. On the other hand, Lewis says that worshiping Jesus Christ is the only way to truly be yourself and reach your full potential. When a person prays, they put on the role of Jesus Christ. With practice and faith, prayer can help people become gods by leading them to safety in heaven. In heaven, people lose their wants for things on earth, which are the main parts of their personalities here on earth. But instead of their old selves, the saved find their real selves, which are unique, individual, and joined in their love for God. This is similar to how the different organs in the body are different from each other, but work together to keep life going. In short, Lewis says that to be a Christian, you have to give up your world needs and wants. But as a prize, you will find Christ and be happy in heaven for all of eternity.
About the author. C.S. Lewis was born in Ireland and grew up there. He went to Oxford University and did well there as an English, classics, and philosophy expert. Lewis fought in World War I. He saw a lot of death and destruction there, which made him an atheist for most of his 20s. Lewis taught at Oxford University for more than 30 years. During this time, he joined the Anglican Church and became a strong voice for Christian beliefs. Lewis's love for Christianity and his huge understanding of mythology and languages led him to write his most famous book, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, the first volume of the Chronicles of Narnia, in 1949. During his life, he wrote poems, articles, literature, autobiographies, works of fantasy and science fiction, and academic criticism, philosophy, and Christian defenses.
Hope we summarized it fully and you liked it. Please hit the like button and subscribe to our channel so that we are motivated to create more videos.